3 sinister and spine-chilling true airplane horror stories exposed. Discover the haunted flights. Sarah felt a spine-chilling unease as she boarded the Haven Air flight, clutching her 2 children closer to her side. The faded blue interior and broken overhead lights of the rickety airplane screamed neglect, sending her heart racing. She looked around. The other passengers exuded a sense of discomfort. An anxious man in the back kept glancing their way. Cold sweat trickled down her back, and instinctively she wrapped her arms tighter around Max and Lily, their wide eyes mirroring her fears. As the plane rolled down the runway and lifted into the sky, the excitement of their long-awaited family vacation turned into something more sinister. The lights flickered rhythmically, shadows danced across the cabin, and the air thickened with a sense of dread. "We're going on an adventure," she whispered, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. But it didn't help shake the feeling of being watched. Mechanical creaks echoed, punctuated by whispers, strange and muffled, that clawed at her confidence. When she approached a flight attendant, her unnervingly blank expression provided no solace. "Everything is fine," she said, her voice flat, leaving Sarah with an unsettling knot in her stomach. She crept toward the cockpit, her heart pounding louder with every step. But the captain's disjointed explanations only deepened her fears. "Routine issues," he said, but there was something in his manner that screamed evasiveness. Suddenly, the plane lurched, and an alarming descent plunged them into chaos. Dark clouds swirled outside, consuming them whole. Sarah's instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. Every horror tale she had ever heard about air travel crashed into her thoughts. The anxious man got to his feet, eyes wide with panic. "Get out," he mouthed, and terror shot through Sarah like ice. Her heart raced as the cabin lights flickered ominously. The whispers grew louder, clustering around her, snaking through the aisles. She heard snippets of phrases. "You shouldn't have come. They will take you too." A chill raced down her spine. The relentless tug of dread twisted tighter around her gut. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue." The whispers morphed into something tangible, spectral figures manifesting around them, the faces of lost passengers twisted in anguish. Max and Lily clutched her tightly, their innocent faces etched with confusion and terror. Sarah's breath quickened, the weight of their fate pressed against her chest. Was this the end? They were not just passengers. They were prey. She quickly scanned the cabin, looking for a sign, a way out, anything to save her children from this cursed flight. The plane shook violently, as if responding to her mounting dread. The sea of familiar fears crashed over her, chasing away any remnants of hope. In this dark moment, Sarah knew she had to face whatever dark presence hunted them before they vanished into the clouds, like so many before. The cabin lurched again, sending a jolt through Sarah's body. Her hands trembled as she gripped the arms of her seat. The temperature had dropped, and a thick fog of despair wrapped around them. She could see the anxious man at the back, his face pale and drawn, as if he could sense the same impending doom. "Mommy," Max whispered, his small voice trembling. "Shh, it's okay," she replied, though her own heart pounded like a drum. She needed to stay strong for them. As the aircraft rocked and swayed like a toy in a storm, the whispers rose to a cacophony. Join us, they beckon, winding through the aisles and curling around her ears like vicious vines. She struggled to rid her mind of those haunting words. The smell of something rotten clawed at her senses, mingling with the metallic tang of fear. Then a high-pitched wail pierced through the chaos. Sarah turned, eyes wide, searching for the source. It came from the overhead compartment. The latch rattled violently, and she could see shadows swirling just beyond the plastic door. Her heart sank. What if it was one of the lost souls trapped on this flight, unable to find peace? "Stay close," she whispered urgently to Max and Lily. They clung to her, eyes filled with terror that mirrored her own. In a desperate bid for control, Sarah rose from her seat and moved toward the source of the shrieks. She had to confront whatever lurked behind that door. Every instinct screamed for her to turn back, but she pushed forward, adrenaline igniting her resolve. "Hey, you!" she called out to the flight attendant, who stood rigidly near the front, eyes glazed and unblinking. "What's going on?" But she didn't respond. The whispers grew urgent, frenzied, as if they sensed her defiance. "You will join us." The words twisted, filling the cabin with a suffocating dread that hinted at long-buried secrets. A sudden jolt rocked the aircraft again, but this time it felt purposeful, deliberate. She glanced back to see the anxious man disappearing down the aisle toward the exit. "We have to get out!" he shouted, breathless and wild. "Wait!" Sarah yelled, but it was too late. The door fumbled open, revealing the churning mass of clouds and darkness outside. As the wind whipped into the cabin like a demonic breath, Sarah felt it pulling at her clothes, her children's faces contorting with fear. Max whimpered, "Mommy, please." Her heart screamed as the flight attendant finally moved, stepping forward as if to close the door. But as she did, her face morphed into a ghastly smile, twisted and unnatural. The whispers morphed into a roar. "One of us! One of us!" In a blinding panic, Sarah lunged for the door, but a vice-like grip seized her arm. It was the anxious man, his eyes glazed, now mirroring the same vacant look as the flight attendant. "Don't do it! Don't go out there!" A surge of raw fear coursed through her veins. "What's happening?" she demanded, fighting against his hold. "It's not safe," he shouted, but behind him the shadows thickened, pouring into the aisle, hungry and relentless. Sarah felt the pull of the whispers and shadows, urging her to give in. And in that moment, her instincts warred with the shocking realization. They weren't just trapped in a storm. They were part of something much darker. The cockpit door swung open with a crashing sound, revealing the captain. But he was not alone. A shadowy figure loomed behind him, a face contorted with rage and grief. "You should never have come here." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her. They weren't just passengers aboard the plane. They were part of something unholy, an entity seeking souls. "Get away from her!" she shouted, pulling her children close. And as the figure stepped forward, shadows trailing behind, she understood one terrifying truth. The flight was headed straight into the maw of an unending nightmare. What would come next? As she stumbled back, thoughts racing, one haunting question clawed at her. Would they survive to land, or would they forever be trapped in this twisted flight? The shadows surged forward, a writhing mass of despair and longing, clawing at the air with spectral hands. Sarah's feet felt rooted to the ground, frozen by terror. The figure in the cockpit stepped closer, its visage obscured but for the glimmer of hollow eyes that seemed to glint like shards of glass. "Join us," it hissed, the words reverberating through the chilling air like a sinister chant. The voices of the restless souls echoed, growing louder, blending with the roar of wind. She turned to look at Max and Lily. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, reflecting the same terror threatening to swallow her whole. "No!" she screamed, pushing back against the anxious man's grip. She had to shield her children from this nightmare, to keep them from the shadows that drew ever nearer. With newfound strength, she tore free, muscles taut with adrenaline. "We have to move!" The cabin trembled as the shadows reached the first row of seats, wrapping around helpless passengers like vines ensnaring their prey. Sarah stumbled back, her mind racing. What was happening? What had they done to get trapped in this living hell? She could feel the whispers beginning to peel away at her resolve. One of us. One of us. Around her, fellow passengers convulsed in horror, their faces distorting in anguish. The flight attendant had joined the chorus, asking only for one thing. One of us. Manifestation of despair. Her ghastly smile stretched unnaturally as she whispered sweet taunts into the air. "You're running out of time." "Mommy, I'm scared." Max's voice shook her from the fog. He grabbed her hand, and she felt his tiny fingers trembling. "Stick together," she urged, fighting against the rising tide of fear. Together, they moved towards the rear of the cabin, navigating past thrashing limbs and anguished faces. The shadows pulsed, almost like a living entity, trying to swallow them whole. "Help us!" a voice from the aisle croaked. It was a man, his face rapidly contorting, eyes wide but soulless, mouth agape in silent screams. Without warning, the aircraft lurched again, this time hard enough to throw everyone off balance. The overhead compartments rattled violently, threatening to burst open. Sarah's heart raced. It was as if the plane itself were alive, rejecting the intruders of darkness that threatened to consume everything. "Mommy, I don't want to die," Lily cried out, despair etched into her small face. In that moment, Sarah understood that they were not just fighting for survival. They were standing against something ancient and malevolent that hungered for them. "Stay close, don't look back," she shouted, grabbing her children. The chaotic atmosphere pressed against them like black smoke, sapping their strength. The whispers had transformed into a wailing crescendo, overwhelming her senses. Suddenly, a blinding light illuminated the cabin, but it wasn't comforting. Its brilliance revealed even more horrors, forms twisting in the corners of her vision, blurred shadows contorted into nightmarish shapes. With a deafening bang, all the cabin lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The screams amplified. "Join us! Join us!" They echoed in Sarah's mind as she felt the oppressive weight of despair closing in. She stumbled backward, colliding with the cool metal aisle divider, clutching her children. But then she remembered. The emergency exits! "There! We need to get to the exits!" she screamed over the chaos, pointing blindly in the direction she hoped would lead to salvation. "Mommy, what if it's a trap?" Max asked, terror lacing his tiny voice. The shadows were tightening around them. Without a choice, she grabbed both kids and launched forward. They moved through the cabin, breath hitching, as they dodged the thrashing limbs and empty stares of souls forever lost. As they approached the exits, Sarah felt a surge of hope for the first time. But then she felt it, an icy grip on her ankle, pulling her down. She turned in horror. The anxious man emerged once more, his eyes wide with a tortured reality. "You can't escape," he rasped, panic and despair mingling in his voice. And then, as he dragged her farther into the depths of darkness, Sarah's last thought was a fragment of dread. What if the exit led them to an even darker fate? Would they find salvation, or was the true horror waiting just outside the door? The darkness enveloped them, thick and suffocating. Sarah's heart raced, panic surging as the icy grip tightened around her ankle. She could hear Max and Lily's cries mingling with the cacophony of sorrowful wails. With desperate strength, she pulled free, wrenching her leg away from the man's grasp and stumbling forward. "Run!" Sarah shouted, hardly recognizing her own voice amidst the terror. They pushed through the crowd, shadows swirling like a storm, each one hungry for the light of life. The screams around them intensified, echoing like whispers of death. It was a race against the swirling void that threatened to engulf them whole. The emergency exit was mere feet away, but every step felt eternal, as if the shadows were dragging her back into their hellish abyss. "Mommy!" Lily cried, her grip tightening around Sarah's hand. "Keep moving," Sarah urged, feeling the weight of dread settle on her shoulders like a crushing stone. She couldn't look back. She wouldn't. The exit doors loomed closer, promising an escape that seemed increasingly unreal. But sudden turbulence pulled them into disarray again, throwing Sarah to the side. She landed hard against a seat, her breath knocked out of her. "Mommy, I can't!" Max shouted. The frightened boy's voice cut through her like a knife, clear and desperate. "No! Come on, get up!" She crawled back and lifted him, her muscles burning, each second dragging as if time itself mocked their plight. Shadows leaned down, caressing the surfaces of seats, inching toward them. The figure in the cockpit stepped forward again, a more defined shape through the haze of fear. It was impossibly tall and thin, a dark marionette that had no right to exist in this realm. "You cannot leave," it hissed, and the air turned frigid around them. Its voice chilled her marrow. Sarah breathed in sharply. "We'll see about that." With a surge of defiance, she bolted, dragging her children toward the exit, her body a shield against the encroaching darkness. All at once, the cabin lights flickered back to life, but the illumination did nothing to chase away the shadows creeping closer. Instead, they glimmered, revealing the fear-maddened faces of fellow passengers, their eyes wide in terror, mouths frozen in silent screams. "Too late, too late," the flight attendant intoned, now occupying the aisle like a sentry of doom. Her once welcoming uniform seemed tattered, as if clinging to a threadbare hope. They weren't the only ones trapped in this haunted nightmare. Desperation clawed at Sarah's throat. "Move! Move!" she commanded, shoving past the attendant, who merely smiled, a crusted grin that promised nothing but despair. In that moment, the door slammed shut. Metal clanged solidly, sealing the escape they sought. The shadows drew nearer, blanketing the cabin with their putrid breath. "Oh no, no," Max gasped, his tiny body shaking like a leaf caught in an unrelenting storm. Lifting her eyes, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the emergency door, her face twisted by fear, eyes wide and pleading. Ceasing her frantic attempts, she grasped the children close, drawing them into a protective embrace. "Whatever happens, I love you," she whispered. But as the shadows writhed around them with newfound veracity, that love felt like a brave, foolhardy stance against an inevitable night. The whispers crescendoed into a terrifying roar, and Sarah could hear the heart-stopping truth. The plane wasn't just up in the air. They were being pulled into a deeper abyss. "Mommy, what's happening?" Lily's voice trembled, echoing the question that gripped Sarah's own heart. Something is coming," she muttered, a dawning realization cascading through her like a cold wave. Suddenly, a shudder rattled the aircraft, far more violent than before, violently lurching them all towards the exit, towards what could only be their reckoning. "Hold on tight," Sarah shouted, as the ground beneath them trembled and the shadows loomed and surged. But just then, chaos erupted. The cockpit door flew open, revealing a swirl of blinding light and a voice that reverberated through every cell in her body. "You can find what you seek, but at a cost." The shadows screeched in dismay, their hold momentarily faltering, a flicker of hope blazing in Sarah's chest. But what was the cost? What would they have to give to escape this nightmare? Desperation clawed at her mind as she rushed forward, pushing through the gathering dark, her children's hands still tightly clutched in hers. What awaited them in the light? Would it be salvation or something far worse? Bright light enveloped Sarah and her children, swallowing them whole. For a brief moment, it felt as if they might break free from the grasp of the shadows. But then, as swiftly as it had arrived, the luminosity flickered and faded, leaving them standing in a dim corridor lined with rusted metal walls. The air was thick, tainted with the metallic scent of blood, and the unsettling hum of machinery vibrated beneath their feet. "Where are we?" Max whispered, his small voice quivering in the gloom. "I don't know," Sarah said, her own heart pounding in rhythm with the droning machinery. She strained to hear, to discern something amidst the oppressive silence, but all she could perceive was the dark presence lingering close behind them. The cockpit door remained ajar, its luminous glow swept away like a dream, and the abyss around them stirred with malignant intent. Echoes of whispered voices curled around her, sinister and teasing, draping themselves over the children's frightened faces. "Mommy, I want to go back," Lily cried, cheeks stained with tears, eyes wide as saucers. "Shh, baby, we can't. We have to keep moving," Sarah urged, taking a step forward, only to hesitate. Behind them, shadows writhed like serpents, pulsing with an unholy life of their own. She could sense them coiling, ready to strike. "Stay close." Finding her bearings, Sarah pushed ahead alongside her children, each step belying the uncertainty within her. The corridor extended endlessly, flickering lights casting long, distorted shapes around them. It felt wrong. Each shadow now seemed more defined, almost alive, watching them, anticipating their every move. Suddenly, a mechanical screech broke through the air, slicing the tension. From a darkened corner, a figure emerged. A gaunt man in tattered clothes, eyes sunken and hollow, stepped forward with jerky movements, like a marionette on worn strings. His grip around a rusted pipe tightened as he approached. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, voice like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "It will take everything from you." "It already has," Sarah snapped, protecting the kids behind her. She felt their small bodies quaking against her, warmth of their fear bleeding into her skin. What had she walked into? "Leave this place," the man implored, stretching a bony hand, long fingers pointing towards the unyielding shadows closing in. "Or surrender before it finds you." "What do you mean?" Max asked, his face pale. "Sacrifice!" the man shrieked suddenly, the sound echoing in the confined space. His eyes flickered with a glimmer of something other than sorrow. Madness. It always demands its due. A chilling realization crashed over Sarah like a wave drowning her hope. The cost. It wasn't mere escape. It was something, or someone, they would have to give up. Dread pooled in her stomach, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of a choice, like a tightrope walker over an abyss of despair. "Mommy," Lily's voice broke through her thoughts, nudging her back from the brink. "What do we do?" As shadows thickened in the corners of the corridor, swirling faster, Sarah understood. Panic would get them nowhere. Fighting for survival demanded something more primal, something buried deep within their hearts. Courage derived from fear. "Together!" she shouted into the darkness, clutching her children close. "We fight together!" But before she could take another step, the ground trembled beneath them, vibrating violently, and the walls began to shift. The cries of those lost echoed, twisted into wails of torment. The lenses of sanity cracked, and shadows reached out, tendrils grasping at her limbs. For every moment she held on, she felt their pull strengthen, gnawing at her resolve. And then, with blinding speed, shadows rushed in, enveloping them. Sarah's vision burst into chaos, a kaleidoscope of light and darkness, hope wrestling with despair. Was this the end, or only the beginning of an unimaginable nightmare? Before the thoughts could settle, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the corridor, and the shadows recoiled as if stung. An almost palpable fear washed through the air, compelling Sarah to face the truth. "Something is here," she gasped, dread spiraling within her chest. What was it, and what would they have to pay for survival? As fear crushed her heart, a flicker of movement caught her eye, shifting in the depth of the darkest shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling. It was watching, waiting. What had they stumbled upon in this accursed place? The shadows twisted with unnatural grace, their tendrils creeping closer, crawling along the metal walls like dark ivy. Sarah felt their chill brush against her skin, a cold invitation to despair. Her breath quickened, rasping in her throat. As the darkness thickened, swirling in on them. Max tugged on her sleeve, his small body trembling. "Mommy, I see it!" "What?" Sarah snapped, keeping her voice steady, but feeling the panic ebbing through her composure. "There, in the shadows!" His voice was barely a whisper, the wonder fading into fear. "Something's there!" Lily clutched her mother's side tightly, eyes wide as they darted across the corridor, looking for something to latch onto for comfort. The silence screamed in her ears, broken only by the thudding of her heart. And then it appeared, a flicker of light in the darkness, ghostly and faint. It danced, a small orb illuminating a clearing, bare of shadows. The figure at its center was humanoid, elongated limbs and a grinning face that twisted with glee. Pain and nostalgia etched into every line. Its eyes glowed like embers, and Sarah felt an unnatural pull towards it. "Mommy, don't!" Max cried, but it was too late. A deep, magnetic voice echoed in her mind, urging her closer. "Come, Sarah, you must join us." "Join us?" she echoed back, grasping firmly onto her children. "What do you want?" The figure extended a hand, as if beckoning her into the glimmering light. Sarah felt the heat radiating from it, merging the warmth of her children's skin against the frostbitten breath of the shadows. "Sacrifice everything. Embrace your fate," it whispered, voice dripping with sweet malice. Sarah could see it now. The shadows were broad, malevolent shapes flowing behind her, hungry and restless. But the orb glowed brighter than anything she'd felt before, pulling her in like a moth to flame. "No!" she shouted, eyes darting away. The weight of the shadows pressed against her back, whispers clawing at her mind, biting at her reason. "Mommy, they're coming!" Lily cried, pointing behind them. Sarah turned, and her stomach dropped. Dark shapes surged and writhed, the whispers melding into a cacophony of fury. They lunged forward, grotesque and furious, clenching at the air with smoky fingers. "Run!" Sarah yelled, gripping the children tight and pushing forward into the fleeting glow of the orb. And yet every step turned heavy, each movement in slow motion. The corridor stretched endlessly, with the shadows gaining on them, their hunger palpable. Movement to the right caught her eye. Another figure, wearing a bright red coat, the fabric torn and tattered. It was a woman, her hair wild, a haunting expression carved into her face. "Don't go into the light, it deceives." She disappeared into the shadows, swallowed whole, as if the darkness had clapped its hands around her. Sarah felt the panic race through her veins, forcing her forward. "Please, we have to get out. Max, Lily, follow me." Sweat rolled down her back as her heart thundered in her chest, every beat a reminder of the peril nearing. The shadows were surging, their cries fierce, a relentless storm of terror captivating her. The light flickered, threatening to fade, and Sarah's hope wavered. Was it too late? Would she pay the price with her children? Or would they vanish into darkness? Ahead, a door loomed at the end of the corridor, pulsating like a heartbeat. If they could reach it, there might be a chance, a way out. But would the cost be too great? Would they lose someone in the process? "Run!" Terror propelled them as they surged forward, the pull of darkness clawing at their heels, desperate to reclaim what it thought was its. Dread settled heavily in Sarah's throat as they barreled toward the door. Just as she reached for the handle, she felt the cold grip of shadows wrap around her ankle, pulling her down. And then she screamed. But the door stood before her, gleaming. What lay beyond? And who, if anyone, would be lost to the shadows before they could escape? "Mommy, help!" They were so close. Would they hold on? Would they survive? The shadows roared as they pulled Sarah into their depths, desperate to keep her from freedom. What would the darkness claim next? The shadows yanked at Sarah's ankle like a vice, cold fingers trying to drag her back down into the abyss. Max and Lily's screams pierced through the chilling whispers that threatened to swallow her whole. She could feel her grip on reality slipping as the panic surged through her veins. "Mommy!" Max's eyes were wide, filled with pure terror. He desperately pulled at his mother's arm. "Don't let them take you!" With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah yanked her foot free from the grasp of darkness. "Keep running!" Her voice was raw, echoing against the metallic walls. Every ounce of strength fueled her as she propelled herself toward the door, a single, desperate thought driving her forward: survival. Lily was right behind, her small feet pounding against the hard floor. But Max stumbled, his small body nearly tumbling as the shadows twisted violently around their backs, their murmurs transforming into a maddening cacophony. "Go!" Sarah shouted, fear giving her voice an edge. She wouldn't leave her children behind. Just when hope sparked, the orb flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows that entwined the walls. It was a fleeting flash, and Sarah's heart sank as she saw the elongated fingers of the shadow grasping at the edges of the light, clawing hungrily, reopening wounds of despair. "Mommy, it wants you!" Max screamed again, his voice breaking, but Sarah could see it. If they reached that door, if they could just get through, they might escape all the darkness clawing at them. The grip of shadows tightened, no longer content to hold mere ankles. They lunged higher, reaching toward Sarah's waist. She could feel them tugging at her, dragging her back toward the cold embrace of despair. With one final push, she reached the door and flung it open, an overwhelming scent of stale air and something rotten pouring out. It was stark and bright beyond, beckoning them into its embrace. But as she prodded her children forward, doubt crept in like smoke. What lay beyond the door? Safety or something worse? Shadows melded in the frame, flickering as if unsure whether to retreat or lunge at them in one last soulless effort. "Mommy, hurry!" Lily cried, fingers fumbling around her mother's arm. "Go, now!" Sarah screamed, her heart racing, pushing her children ahead of her. They stumbled through the threshold, an expanse of light so blinding it momentarily disoriented her. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked as if enraged, pulling away from her with a backlash of fury. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing it off with a resounding thud. Breathing heavily, Sarah turned to face her children, chest heaving, wide-eyed with fear. But the relief was short-lived. Before them stood an empty hallway lined with flickering lights, pale and lifeless. The walls that surrounded them began to close in, echoing the same steel textures of the corridor they had just escaped from. "Where are we?" Max whispered, his voice small in the vast emptiness. A chill slithered down Sarah's spine as she noticed the familiar shadowed form lingering at the door's edge, looming like a predator, waiting for its prey. "No," she breathed, dread pooling in her stomach. It was watching them, still hungry, still eager for the chase. A twisted grin emerged from the depths of darkness. "Mommy, it's coming!" Lily squeaked, recognizing the malice afore her mother could fully comprehend. The air filled with tension, thick and desperate. They had escaped one horror, but had only walked into another, and the one behind them, the shadows, were far from finished. Where could they possibly go now? And as Sarah backed away, the walls whispered her name again, drawing them deeper into a nightmare that refused to release its hold. What awaited them in the hollow of this new darkness? Sarah's pulse quickened as the walls closed in, an uncanny echo of her racing heart replacing the silence. She scanned the hallway, searching for a way out. The flickering lights cast a sickly glow, emphasizing every crack and crevice. Shadows danced as if mocking her attempts to find safety. "Where do we go?" Max whimpered, clinging to her leg, his small body trembling. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, forcing calm into her voice despite the terror gnawing at her insides. They could hear the whispers grow louder now, melding into a single voice, a sinister chant weaving through the air like a poisonous fog. Sarah's eyes darted toward the end of the hallway, where the light seemed to pulse rhythmically, a beacon amid the suffocating dark. "Mommy, it's getting louder!" Lily backed up against the wall, her eyes wide and teary. "I feel it." "It's okay, Lily. We'll be fine," she lied, willing herself to believe the words. But deep down, Sarah could feel the dark energy creeping closer, hungry and impatient. "We need to move," Sarah barked, glancing back. The shadowed form at the door had vanished, but dread pooled in her stomach, knowing it lurked nearby, biding its time. "Let's go," she urged, her voice strong, but inside she fought against despair. She turned toward the flickering light and led her children forward, each step slow, deliberate. The hallway felt endless, stretching into darkness with each glowing square overhead flickering ominously. The whispers twisted into a cacophony, clawing at her mind. "Not your children. They do not belong to you." The voice slid through her thoughts, chillingly familiar. She could almost see the shadows shifting, forming grotesque faces, faces that seemed to know her, as if drawn from her own nightmares. "No!" Sarah yelled, clamping her hands over her ears, forcing herself to focus. Her children were here, standing beside her. They were safe. She was their shield. She couldn't let fear devour her. Suddenly, the lights shot out, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged. Sarah froze, breath hitching in her throat. "Mom, I can't see!" Max cried, gripping her hand tighter, the sound of his heart pounding against her chest, mingling with the growing whispers. "Stay close." She reached for Lily, her free hand brushing against her daughter's hair, desperate to keep her near. The whispers swelled, filling the void, wrapping around them like a dense fog. "You will lose them. Come with me." "No!" Sarah shouted again, an instinct born from love igniting her courage. "We will not go!" She pulled her children close, steeling herself. But in the suffocating dark, she felt the cold presence return, a swirl of icy shadows encircling them. The weight of their despair pressed against her chest, threatening to extinguish her will. "Mommy?" Max's voice quaked, a soft tremor that contrasted with the stillness around them. "Hold on to me," she commanded, but doubt gnawed at her resolve. They were lost in an abyss filled with malevolence, and the shadows whispered in her ear, "They won't escape." In a moment of unfathomable fear, Sarah felt a hand brush against her shoulder, cold, clammy, and real. She spun around, her heart racing, but found nothing, just darkness. She gripped her children's hands tighter, desperately holding on to the flicker of hope. "Just a little further," she urged, forcing her legs to move, dragging her children with her. The hallway began to twist, warping as if opposing forces were at play. The flickering light ahead pulsed harder, brighter, almost inviting them to come closer. This way, the whispers lull sweetly, disguising their dark intent. As they moved toward the light, she could see a doorway at the end, framed in shimmering brilliance. It felt too easy, too inviting. Doubt flared again in her mind. Was it a trap? "Mom, wait!" Lily's tiny voice was soaked in hesitation. "Just step into the light," the whispers coaxed, coaxing them forward with promise. But could she trust it? What if the shadows were waiting just beyond? And then the floor beneath Sarah's feet shifted, softening like quicksand as darkness re-swelled around her ankles. Was this the end? The shadows loomed large in her mind. There was no way back. Cold reality settled. This was not an escape, only a deeper dive into malevolence. Then something snapped inside Sarah. With a primal scream, she surged forward, dragging her children along, racing towards the light as desperation fueled her heart. "Run!" As they hurtled into the blinding brightness, Sarah wondered what awaited them on the other side. Whatever hunted them would not relent, and she could feel its cold breath on her back. What lay in the light? The light was blinding. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, pulling her children close as they plunged into the brilliance. An overwhelming sense of danger thrummed just beneath the surface of the radiance, twisting her stomach into knots. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving them in a dim, cavernous space that felt entirely different from the hallway. The air was thick, saturated with the scent of decay. Shadows clung to the corners of the room like cobwebs, and a faint, grating sound echoed, a low, mournful wail. "Mommy?" Max's voice trembled, the innocence of his question slicing through the oppressive air. "Shh!" Sarah hushed, her heart racing. They had escaped one darkness, only to step into another. She took a cautious step forward, her foot landing on something squishy. She looked down, gasping at the sight. A mass of tangled roots and something else, writhing in the dimness. Then she saw them, figures motionless in the shadows, huddled against the walls. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as she recognized pale faces staring blankly. They looked familiar. "Mom, look!" Lily pointed toward a figure at the edge of the room, shadows dragging it down to the ground like a heavy weight. As Sarah stepped closer, she felt a wave of nausea hit her. It was her own reflection staring back. But it wasn't just a mirror image. It was her, distorted and twisted, eyes wide with terror. "Run!" she yelled, pulling her children away from the disturbing scene. The echoes of their footsteps ricocheted around the room, melding with the ongoing wails. The figures began to stir, shadows flickering around them as if awakened from a slumber. A sudden rush of wind whipped through the cavern, sending a chill cascading over Sarah's skin. "Don't look back," she commanded, urging her children forward. Lily stumbled as the floor began to tremble, fissures appearing in the ground like gaping mouths ready to swallow them whole. Despair clawed at Sarah's mind like a beast ravenous for prey. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. "Mommy, I'm scared," Max cried out, tears streaming down his dirty cheeks. "I know, sweetheart. Just hold on to me." Sarah gritted her teeth, refusing to let fear poison her resolve. They dashed toward a door at the far wall, barely visible through the swirling shadows. Footsteps echoed behind them, heavy and deliberate. Sarah's heart raced as she discerned a figure emerging from the gloom. A grotesque silhouette, elongated and twisted, its face lost in darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah propelled her children forward. Almost there! The door was inches away now. But just as she reached for the handle, she felt a cold grip wrap around her ankle, yanking her back with force. "Mom!" Lily screamed, her tiny voice piercing the air. "Go! Don't look back!" Sarah shouted, fighting against the darkness pulling her down. She kicked and squirmed, desperately trying to free herself, but the grip tightened, drawing her towards the floor, where horror awaited. Suddenly, memories flashed before her, images of her children, their laughter echoing in warm light, the safety of their home. It was all slipping away. Panic surged. She wouldn't let it end here. In one last burst of fury, she kicked free, scrambling to the door and throwing it open just as the shadows seemed to emanate outwards. A gust of cold air surged around her, stinging her skin like ice. With one last look over her shoulder, Sarah caught sight of the figure, an amorphous mass reaching out with shadowy tendrils that seemed to whisper her name. "Mommy!" Sarah snatched Max and Lily's hands and pulled them through the doorway. They stumbled out onto a narrow path, shadowy trees looming menacingly overhead. "Where are we now?" Max whispered, looking around in confusion, his eyes wide with fear. Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears as she scanned their surroundings. The trees were gnarled and twisted, like clawing hands reaching toward the sky. The path wound into darkness, but one thing was certain. Whatever pursued them had not given up. "Just keep moving," she urged, her voice trembling but firm. Somewhere within the blackness, a familiar whisper curled through the air, beckoning them back. "You can't escape." Fear gripped her heart, but she forged ahead. Shadows loomed like sentinels along their path, ready to engulf them. As they moved deeper into the dark, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. And amidst it all, Sarah pondered the inevitable question. What awaited them in this new nightmare? They had escaped one trap, but the terror was far from over. What horror lurked in this darkness? The path twisted and turned, dim and suffocating. Sarah led her children forward, determination edging out despair. The shadows loomed larger, as if watching their every move. Each step felt like wading through thick mud, but she didn't dare stop. "Mommy, I'm tired," Max whined, his voice shaking. The softness of his plea clawed at her heart. "You're so strong, Max," she replied, her voice firm but gentle. "Just a little further, I promise."
Lily held tightly to Sarah's hand, her tiny fingers trembling. "Where are we going?" she asked. Fear sparked in her wide eyes, a mirror of the terror boiling inside Sarah. "Somewhere safe," Sarah replied, though her own heart quaked at the uncertainty of it all. She could still feel the cold tendrils of darkness lurking behind, eagerly waiting to strike. Suddenly, the air shifted. A chilling gust swept through the air. Trees rattling the very bark of their twisted trunks. "You must choose." A voice, soft yet haunting, twisted through the silence. It felt like a slap, reverberating against her will. Shadows curled and writhed along the ground, probing for a way in. "Choose what?" Sarah demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Who will stay?" It echoed again, slithering through the darkness. Panic exploded within her. They had already lost too much. Her life was not a game for the dark forces lurking here. "No, you can't have my children!" The ground trembled beneath them, pulsating, as if alive. Shadows coiled around her ankles, threatening to drag her back into an abyss of despair. The path narrowed, and Sarah's heart raced. "Mommy!" Max cried, eyes wide with fright. "Hold on!" she yelled, as she forced herself to remain upright, still pushing forward. "Stay close!" Through the branches, she saw a flicker of light, soft, almost tender against the oppressive dark. "There!" she pointed. "We can make it!" With renewed vigor, the three of them sprinted toward the light. But the shadows were relentless, clawing and grasping at her arms, trying to hold her back. "Mommy! Mommy!" they cried in a chorus of fear. "Stay behind me!" Sarah shouted, a fierce protectiveness awakening deep within. With adrenaline sparking in her veins, she pushed forward, all her love and strength directed toward that sliver of light. Suddenly, her foot slipped and she stumbled. Max and Lily cried out. As she caught herself, heart racing, but just in time she regained her balance and continued her fight. The light flickered like a candle flame, fragile but filled with promise. And as they broke through the underbrush, they emerged into a clearing, bright, warm, and filled with an otherworldly glow. It was a sanctuary amidst the chaos. But the shadows followed. The darkness encroached upon the edges of the clearing, stretching like a predator poised to snap its jaws. "One of you may stay," the voice caressed their ears, now laced with urgency. "No!" Sarah held her children closer, shaking her head violently. "You're not taking anyone!" The trees around them quaked in dismay. "You must choose," it hissed, coiling tighter around the edges of their sanctuary. "What do they want from us?" Lily's voice wavered as she pressed against her mother's side, the innocence of her presence grounding Sarah. "They want to break us, but I won't let that happen," Sarah said fiercely, the words scrambling from her heart. She looked into her children's eyes, so wide with understanding, yet so full of childhood oblivion. They were everything to her. Giving in wasn't an option. "Together!" she blasted into the shadows, a battle cry slicing through the fear. "We will not give anyone up!" The shadows recoiled as if struck, their whispers shrieking in horror. "It is too late." "No!" Sarah shouted. "We won't be trapped here anymore. You don't have power over us." She envisioned a barrier, lighting up around them, a fierce bulwark forged from the love she felt for her children. The shadows twisted, shrieking in fury. The clearing began to pulse with light, spilling over the edges as if reclaiming its ground. And then something shifted. Through the brilliance, a memory sparked. Warm sunshine bathing her children's laughter within their home. It felt more real than fear, grounding her, igniting a flame within. "Stay with me, hold tight," she urged, as an overwhelming wave of light surged around them. With that, the shadows twisted, swatted away like the distressing flutter of a wing.
Their shouts of rage echoed faintly as they dwindled into the earth, fading into nothingness. The light swallowed them, wrapping around Sarah, Max, and Lily like a warm embrace. She felt as if she was being pulled upward, swirling above the fear that had threatened to consume them. Moments later, they landed softly on solid ground, free from the suffocating grip of darkness. Dazed, they looked around. Sun streamed down, birds chirped, the air crisp and clear. They had escaped. "Mommy!" Max squealed, enveloping her neck with his small arms. "Are we safe?" Sarah pulled them both in close, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, my loves, we're home," she gasped, breathless. In that moment, everything shifted. The shadows were gone, and what lay ahead felt wide and full of possibility. They were not just survivors of that nightmarish flight. They emerged whole, anchored in love. "Can we fly again?" Lily asked, her voice tiny but eyes sparkling with the thrill of new beginnings. "Maybe one day," Sarah said, smiling eternally down at her children. "But today we celebrate life." And as they walked forward, hand in hand, laughter swept through the air, a melody of assurance that echoed much louder than any whisper of despair. It was a new dawn, a new adventure, and they were ready for whatever came next. But somewhere in the distance, a shadow watched, waiting for the chance to strike again. Don't let this ending slip away. You need to subscribe now. Hit that button and join the family so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now if you think Sarah and her kids deserve a peaceful flight next time. Every interaction helps the channel grow. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories. What do you think lies ahead for Sarah, Max, and Lily? And for the love of storytelling, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the adventure. Your support means everything.